I vividly remember that sitting in the university hall, like in the lecture hall, the first day and looking around, and there were 700 people starting with me that same day studying the same thing. And I thought there is no way that by having exactly the same skill as everyone else, I'm going to get anywhere in life. I basically mentally checked out of it that day.
This episode is brought to you by Covered.io, an options trading tool that we use to generate extra income to free up time so we can pursue projects like this podcast. This is the Covered Call, the podcast where we explore the journey towards true freedom. In each episode, we bring on guests that have charted their own course towards more freedom, more contentment, and more impact in their lives.
Today, we're joined by Swen Lorenz. He's an investor, entrepreneur, and a writer who's built a life around topics such as freedom, his own curiosity, contrarian thinking, and uncovering hidden investments. There's even an event and an ebook that I saw in your things called Weird Shit Investing. I'm really curious to see what all that's about. And also who came up with that chicken that wears a suit, because I freaking love that. Swen's journey really seems like a masterclass in thinking differently and living boldly. And so I'm very, very excited that you're here today with us, Swen. Thank you so much for joining.
Hi, Jason. Hi, Lois. Myself, very, very happy to be here. This is going to be a very different kind of conversation based on what we've discussed so far. So I'm myself excited to be participating in something that's slightly more experimental and lateral thinking and edgy.
Nice. Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad that you think of us in that way. These are all good adjectives.
We have a lot to live up to right now.
So we really are trying to figure out with this podcast, with this initiative that we're doing here, to connect with people like yourself who are walking a different path in life, who are not doing the 9-to-5 grind, and who are basically following their own passion, but turn that into a business, investment opportunities, share that with others, etc. So I became aware of you because of a lovely guest that we've had on, Adrian Day, and he spoke very highly of your essentially of your research. He said, yeah, he does some really high quality research. You should look into his stuff. And so then, that's why I looked you up, and then I saw like, oh, there's a lot more here than just, shares research. So I would love to connect. And so now here we are. But so, Swen, I'm super curious. How did you get started with this?
Probably a bit by accident, and also simply by doing things, starting them, and then learning by doing. So I got interested in shares and stock market investing when I was 16, and I started reading magazines about it at the time. And then I went to shareholders meetings in the Frankfurt region, sort of skipped high school and went to shareholders meetings instead, and asked lots of questions at these meetings. And there was a journalist from one particular investment newsletter that was read by basically all the banks in Germany, and they didn't have any young talent, so it was a bit of an aging industry. And he asked me, hey, would you like to occasionally contribute something to our newsletter? And that's how I got started as a freelance writer. And that enabled me in a way to take the first steps towards what is your favorite subject, that of living a relatively free and independent life. I had income, I had spare cash, and I was doing a job that didn't require me to go to an office at 9 in the morning on a subway train. And I guess that carved out or put me onto a certain path.
Yeah, fantastic. So literally you followed your passion and you stumbled across somebody, connected with them, and they were like, hey, you want a job? I mean, the best kind of job, which is from home and completely independent, essentially. But
I think that sounds too much like randomness. And I basically live by an old motto of Woody Allen, the actor, who said that turning up is 80% of success. And what he meant is basically you have to go out there and you have to make other people see you and notice you, and you have to speak with them, and then good stuff happens. And it's really as simple as that. And I went to these shareholders meetings without really having much of a clear plan, and I asked questions that were born out of my curiosity, and some people thought this is really interesting what this guy is asking about. And then things go from there. Had I just simply stayed at home, none of that would have happened. That's what I'm saying. So do stuff, go out there, take some risks, and then life will progress from there.
Yeah, I think, Lovis, we've noticed that as well, right? Like when we've gone and done more than just write an email, like we actually go rub shoulders with people, a lot more organic magic happens, right? I think.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and even when you meet somebody cool, making the effort of meeting them in person, it seems kind of antiquated, but it makes a massive difference, right? It's a more than 10x difference in the quality of relationship that you build with somebody if you've actually met them in person.
Absolutely, and got drunk with them and, staggered home. But
Yeah.
I think the real magic really lies in both. You have to do the digital stuff and meet people in real life. And through digital channels, you meet the right people and then you get a chance to meet them in real life. But you also have to make that happen. You just have to organize events and dinners and coffee meetings. And it's really up to you to create everything. Everything is there for the taking. You just have to be proactive.
Nice. So from this first freelance gig, so when you started that, you said you skipped high school to do that. You were still very young, so you were underage, probably.
Yeah, I was 16, and by the time I was 18 or 19, I had basically a full-fledged career as a freelance writer in the German investment industry.
And then what was next from there?
So I did sign up to university, but there were two problems. First of all, I already had a significant income from my writing. And the other one was, and I vividly remember that, sitting in the university hall, like in the lecture hall, the first day and looking around, and there were 700 people starting with me that same day studying the same thing. And I thought there is no way that by having exactly the same skill as everyone else, I'm going to get anywhere in life. And I basically mentally checked out of it that day. I stuck around for a bit longer than that, but I think really on the first day, my desire to study at university economics and management pretty much died right on the spot. And I then continued my writing and made some money on the stock market and eventually dropped out of university.
It's super interesting. So some previous guests that we've had on, most prominent one is Doug Casey. He's now really strongly advocating for young people to just skip university altogether unless you have a super specific reason why you want to go, and it requires the rigor, right? The structured learning, maybe math, maybe physics, maybe engineering. But otherwise, he's like, don't waste your time. That time is when you're that age, these 4 years or however long it'll take you to go to university is so special and so valuable because you're in the prime curiosity of your life, basically. So don't use it. I love how you described it. It's like, man, I'm just one fish in the barrel here, right? How am I going to be the biggest fish, so to say? Like that's very difficult. So why go and compete if you can go do your own thing instead and follow your own path?
Yeah, and you can even add further to that. I mean, just as you said, if you want to be a brain surgeon, you have to go to university. But looking at all these fluffy subjects, like, I don't know, reading history, and I would even include economics and management and stuff like that, I think you're largely wasting your time at a day and age when university have become, let's say, institutions where you might get indoctrinated to all sorts of ideologies. Secondly, it probably runs at way too slow a pace, given that you can just go onto the internet and binge watch some of the world's smartest people in whatever field and learn from them instead of, sitting through university lectures. And it's also very expensive. And, just to repeat what I already said, you're not really carving out your niche. You're just doing what everyone else is doing. And I would strongly voice that I, fully agree with Doug. But each case is different, and it warrants very careful introspection. What is right for you? It's not something that, this advice isn't for everyone.
Yeah.
But Sven, just the fact that you were able to take that step back and say, hey, maybe this isn't for me. at that young age? Like, was there something that equipped you to do that? Because I would say for most young people, it's always about, hey, safety in numbers, join the herd, and then maybe try and be the cool ones inside the herd, right? But to have the courage to go, hey, this isn't for me. Like, even that thought in itself is somewhat revolutionary at this age, right? Because what do you mean for me? I want to wear Calvin Klein like everybody else. I want to have Ray-Bans, How was there some thing that or event that allowed you to be that kind of aware?
I would say it was really just gut instinct and common sense. Of course, I was also under peer pressure. My parents didn't like me dropping out of university, and I was doing something very different, which makes you quite vulnerable. And you feel very vulnerable, especially if you're young. That said, I mean, your generation now, you guys, live at the best time ever in history, especially when it comes to planning your life, analyzing what you want to do, and then going about it, because you've got this amazing resource called the internet. And I mean, when I was in my early 20s, there was no possibility of tapping into all these clever people who are now on YouTube, and you can contact almost anyone you like on Twitter, or at least follow them and connect with them on LinkedIn and read what they're doing. You'd be surprised how many high-profile people will reply to you if you send them an email. And I mean, you are, you're the
Can confirm. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Just looking at your podcast. Of course, it takes a certain personality type, but I think for your generation, it's easier than ever before. And throw into that as a bonus the fact that setting up your own business nowadays is cheaper and easier than ever before. This used to be about, for example, if you wanted to set up an internet business, you needed to buy, server farms and lots of equipment and things like that.
Yeah.
Now you just sign up to Amazon Web Space, and the cost of setting up a startup, I mean, you can never generalize, but if I had to generalize, and someone in Silicon Valley just told me this last week, the cost for setting up a startup has probably gone down by 10x over the last 5 or 8 years. And that enables you to, do things differently, and everything else is up to you, and nothing in life is easy.
Yeah. Especially nothing worth doing is ever easy, right? But yeah, the cost is like laughably small, and I think AI is driving it further down. But we'll see. So if we were to step inside your mind on a random morning, what would we hear? So
basically, leave me alone, I'm busy writing. So I enjoy few things as much, or actually nothing as much as writing. And a lot of people say, oh, Sven, your output is really prolific and you write so much, etc., etc. And it's just simply due to the fact that I enjoy it a lot. And I tend to get up quite early in the morning. And from 6 in the morning to midday, I'm basically quite antisocial, and I just want to focus on writing, whether it's articles or research reports or replying to emails or, sending out lots of WhatsApp messages. And I'm just, I guess, really focused. And in a way, this is the most valuable part of my day, because I'm the most productive. So you would only hear work-related things in my mind at that time of the day. After 12 o'clock, I tend to loosen up a bit.
That's good. Well, so you have that very much set aside. But so you shift through many different time zones. Do you try to keep that routine the same no matter where you are?
I do, very much so. Of course, it's not always easy with different time zones. Then again, I'm also not traveling that much. I mean, so yeah, I wouldn't call that a major issue, really. It's just down to establishing a routine. And then if you live by that routine on 90 or 95% of the days, then you're already ahead of 99% of everyone else.
Yeah,
and
100%.
Occasionally, having a glitch in the matrix is not really an issue. You're not perfect.
And so how do I say this? You clearly had the passion to go and pursue this, but did things like desire for freedom and independence play into that? Is that a conscious choice, or is that just kind of part of your operating system? Like there really wasn't a different option for you?
It's probably a bit of both. And in retrospective, things are always much clearer than when they're actually happening. And I guess if we want to speak about freedom and independence and taking steps towards that, the first serious step that I had to take towards that was when the German military was after me, because back in the 90s, we still had conscription in Germany. And there was also the option to do social services. That would have been 18 months. Conscription was, I think, 12 months. And as I always said, for me, it was very much about the principle. I don't like being told what to do, least of all by a government bureaucrat who thinks they own my life. And had it been one day, I would still have objected against it. And what I did at the time, and this is where, what I said earlier, that I already had some income that comes in handy. A little bit of spare cash can buy you freedom. When I was 18, I had enough money to hire a lawyer and defend me against the military. And I did a few other things. Maybe I incentivized one or the other doctor to come up with a medical opinion about, things that I was potentially suffering from. And I then eventually took the German military to court. A very intimidating experience when you're 19 and you get these letters saying Swen Lorenz versus the Federal Republic of Germany. And you know that literally your life is on the line. I'm joking about this now, but it was not a nice experience at the time. And I knew that I was never going to win my case because I was up against the system, the machine. So I knew that there was going to be a point where I needed a plan B. And the plan B was that eventually I had to leave the country. With my lawyer, I found a loophole that enabled me to leave the country without being a deserter. So I never broke a law. But I did have to leave the country, and I moved to the UK. And in a way that taught me a lot about the need to be quite conscious in choosing where you live and potentially also simply leaving where you are, which is not an easy decision, because leaving the country where you grew up or where you're already resident and you have family and loved ones and work, that is one of the most serious decisions you can take in life. But sometimes you need to do it. And in retrospective, I'm quite serious now when I say that I'm extremely grateful to the German military, because without them, I would not have left the country at the age of 23. I would not have moved to London. That gave me a very different outlook on life. It gave me access to opportunities that I would have never had. So to cut a long story short, that's how I got my first taste of freedom, and freedom that you have to fight for. But then once you've done it once, it becomes a lot easier and you're more aware of what you're actually doing. Back then, I would not have understood any of that. I was just basically trying to not have to get into the military.
Sven, do you mind elaborating on that? Like, why was moving to the UK compared to, say, living still in Germany? What's the big difference there? Because for most people that are not from Europe, they would say, hey, it's two similar social democratic countries that, are very close geographically and culturally. So what was the big aha moment for you when you went to the UK and went, oh, wow, this is so different. I'm glad I'm not still in Germany.
I would say that London has a unique position in Europe. It is, and even beyond Europe, I would say that London to this day very much is the capital of the world. And yes, there are other cities that are very important and very impressive and that I like, but there's no other city that sits quite between the time zones in the way that London does. So you've got, America that way, Asia that way, we're in the middle. If you live in London, you can deal with any part of the world in a relatively comfortable way when it comes to time zones. There's still the remnants of the Commonwealth. I don't know how many countries that is right now, but something like 50 or so, which gives the UK a unique global network. International commerce is built on English law. International business is done using the English language. As I've always been saying, if you live in London, you actually don't need to travel, because everyone and anyone comes to London at least once a year. You just need to sit here and wait for people to turn up. And social life, I'd say, is more open and more open-minded than in most other parts of Europe. It's much more everyone is very happy to meet with, people from all backgrounds and from anywhere. And you just end up meeting lots and lots of people from all over the place. And I would say there's no other city in Europe and probably in the world that enables that quite in the way that London does it. And I was lucky to move here. I didn't know these things. I only found them out over time. Besides, it was also a tax haven at the time. I mean, a genuine tax haven. If you didn't have a British passport and you registered as a so-called non-dom, it was complete Wild West. And yeah, that basically saved me a lot of money.
Nice. I had never heard that glowing of an endorsement for London, but it makes sense. I have to admit to my shame that even though I only live, a hop, skip, and a jump away, I have not been. So I
Yes,
need
and
to
of
go.
course you would experience it differently if you visit it as a tourist than if you live here.
Of course, yeah.
London for tourism is its own animal. If you just end up going to the normal tourist spots and you go at high season and it's overcrowded and everything is completely outrageously overpriced, you may not have a great experience. If you live here and you figure out how the place functions, that's quite different. So,
Yeah.
just keep that in mind.
No, of course. I mean, I have lived in other countries, so I'm familiar with the. It takes, to really get familiar with a new place that you move to, I think always takes about a year until you you have to spend like all the seasons once, and then you kind of get the lay of the land and you can figure things out. Yeah, that's been kind of my experience.
Maybe you need to get drunk a few times and stumble home a few times will accelerate the learning process.
Yeah, probably. But so, Sven, is this where you still are now, or where do you call home?
I am currently in London for exactly that reason. You can meet people here easily, but I'm in a hotel room. So home right now is the island of Sark in the English Channel, which is one of the Channel Islands, and that's something I've become reasonably well known for in recent years. I moved to a place that only has 600 residents, but which for all intents and purposes is its own country. It's probably as close to the libertarian dream as any jurisdiction will ever get. It's not perfect, but it's pretty damn good. As I always say, the tax return is one page and you don't have to disclose income or assets. And we don't have an employment law, and the place has a complete minimalist government. It's set within a jurisdiction with great political freedom and political stability. And it suits me very well. It's also a lifestyle question. I like Northern Europe. I prefer that to Southern Europe. And of course, we don't get as much sunshine as Cyprus or Malta, but I prefer to be in an English-speaking country in Northern Europe, and there are only so many choices for that, and Sark suits me very well.
How do you get in and out? Is it an airport or is it by boat?
So Sark famously has no airport. It also has no cars. It only has tractors. And it is located next to the island of Guernsey, which is one of the other Channel Islands, and they're sort of separately governed. They all govern themselves, basically. And Guernsey has an airport. It has 62,000 residents, and it also has a very successful finance industry. Half of the economy is finance. And incredibly, there are 5 or 6 flights a day between Guernsey and London Gatwick. And there are other flights as well to cities across the UK. I think once or twice a week we now have a flight to Paris. I've never taken that yet. We're not well connected to anywhere but the British Isles, but to get back and forth is really not that much of an issue. You need to like being on boats, because from Sark to Guernsey you have to take a ferry, and that's about 40 minutes, and it's the English Channel, it's not the Caribbean. So it can get rough. If you're lucky, you get to see dolphins. Again, it's just a lifestyle decision.
That's cool. Yeah, I saw on your blog that you actually discontinued selling your guide on moving to Sark because basically Sark is full now. Like your marketing campaign was so successful. Is that fair to say?
That is fair to say to some extent. So when I ran that first marketing campaign for Sark, about 20% of the island's real estate was empty. And that was in 2020, and 120 new residents did register, and I kind of filled up what was sort of immediately available. There was a significant amount of churn as well, because it wasn't for everyone, which is normal in any island situation. You usually have 50% of people leaving within 2 years. I once lived in the Galapagos Islands and was exactly the same there. It was also COVID times. And then there was one aspect that I hesitate somewhat to speak about, because it may make me sound a bit negative, but I think it's worth mentioning, since you also just mentioned I've stopped selling the guide. A lot of people moved to Sark who were really not experienced in moving to another jurisdiction and building their lives. And then you end up dealing with their problems. And that would be fair enough if I was running a full-time consultancy to help people with their problems. But if you just sell a book, and then you have people basically wanting to, manage or restructure their entire life. It's really just too much effort in the end. And I met many amazing people. I'd have no regrets, but it's not my business. It's a one-off I did, and it's too time consuming for too little money. And now Sark is basically restocking itself under its own steam.
Yeah, good. You gave him an initial lift, and now it has some natural traction, some organic traffic, so to say. So this is all super fascinating, Swen. Thank you so much for sharing that, and the good and the bad, right? Because I think that's always the interesting part, is seeing both sides of the coin. So shifting a little bit to entrepreneurship and like the idea of value creation in the market. If I and Jason would shadow you for a week to just see what you do, what do you think would surprise us the most on how you operate your life and business?
I guess it's that I'm spending half the day cursing, and all I do is deal with problems. And I think the reality of entrepreneurship, which very often gets glamorized, it's that building a business and managing a business basically means solving problems all day, every day. I mean, building a business means that you've identified friction somewhere and you're solving a problem. And that in itself means you're dealing with something that is difficult a lot of the time, because if it was easy, someone else would have solved that problem already. And then if you actually run your own business, if you're the boss or in the senior management team, then if something is working fine, it doesn't end up on your desk because someone is taking care of it. You just deal with all the stuff that, somehow is a problem and no one else can deal with it or wants to deal with it. So in a way, entrepreneurship, much as it gives you a certain amount of liberty and freedom, and it means you may not have to travel to an office in the morning, so there's no commute, which is something I appreciate a lot, but it does mean you still have to deal with a lot of quite unpleasant work on an ongoing basis. It can be very frustrating, and the more ambitious your undertaking is, the more difficult it will be. So you'd hear a lot of cursing.
Good. Multi-language, I imagine.
Yes.
Yeah,
But does it ever get you down, or you always find a way to remind yourself about the big overarching motivation, and that's enough to keep you going?
Basically, yes. And I always keep in mind that great quote from Winston Churchill, who said that when you're going through hell, just keep going. There's no other option, really. And I think what helps is to set yourself goals. And there's this other saying, this too shall pass, and to make sure that, every day you tick something off the list, which gives you a very satisfying feeling. And then you just plow on with the next one.
Yeah, 100%. Do you use a specific framework for goal setting, or is it just something you come up with like quarterly goals for your business, or is it different? Is it like a to-do list, a daily, or how do you do it?
Yeah, so I'm a traditionalist. I use pen and paper, and every now and again, I just sit down and write up a long list where I then cross out things, I add them, and then comes another point after 6 or 8 weeks where I basically start over with an entirely fresh list. And that's probably very old-fashioned and very crude, but it works very well for me. I like to keep things simple. Another great quote I have is from, I spent some time once with a Dutch multi-billionaire who made his own fortune, and he was already in his 70s, so he had lots of experience, and asked him, like, what's the one thing you pass on to young people as advice for building your empire and being successful? And he said, keep it simple, because if it's not simple, it won't work. And I try to keep things as simple as possible, which is why I once looked at project management tools, and I think everything is overcomplicated nowadays. So a piece of paper with a list works just fine for me.
Yeah. So I do the bit more decentralized equivalent of that. So I have a small team of engineers that actually sit in the US where my company is, and we do it's a simple one-page quarterly planning, and then we do weekly plans, and it's just a checklist. There's the projects, they have some to-dos. We revisit it every day for a few minutes. Everybody picks what they're going to work on. Then when it's done, you check it off. And then when we checked off all the boxes, we go to lunch. Like it's a simple method, but it works, right?
Yeah. And since you mentioned, a one-page overview, there's actually a book called The One-Page Business Plan, which I think is one of the most underappreciated books in the world of business plan books. It's fairly old now, but you can still get it on the internet.
I have heard of it. I don't know if I've read it. I don't remember. But I'll put it on the list. So one nice perk that we have, Jason and I have from doing this podcast, is that we have smart, successful people like yourself recommending valuable books to us. So we've actually been stacking up a reading list quite a bit. There's one on my desk right now. A variety of topics, but it's been really super interesting to do the homework, so to say, after the episodes and study up. So you just mentioned one of the best pieces of advice that you've gotten regarding entrepreneurship with keeping it simple. What would be one of the worst pieces of advice that you've received?
Can't think of a piece of advice right now, but I think one of the worst things I've done in my life is to ignore my gut feeling. And I think kids should be taught in school to listen to their gut feeling and how to do that. And I'd say the few major regrets I have in life boil down to I kind of knew it was not the right thing, but I did it anyway. Like I was once running an organization where I had the feeling, I've taken this to success. Now I should leave and step down and hand it over. And I didn't do that. And then I wasted a year of my life on complete garbage. And not listening to my gut feeling, I think is the equivalent of what you just asked about.
Yeah. Do you have in your ventures, do you have business partners typically, or are you a solo entrepreneur?
I have business partners. Yeah, you can't do things by yourself.
Okay. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
So I think the one that's most visible right now is I've set up a new fund management business called Sanya Asset Management based in Guernsey. And I have two co-founders in that. And the three of us got this started. And without each of the three individuals at the table, this would have never gotten off the ground. And then I think quite importantly, and possibly even more importantly, we now have a number of shareholders who contribute actively to the business and contribute a lot of knowledge as well. And yes, there's an argument for saying that to run a one-person business gives you the perfect lifestyle and you never have to answer to anyone. But the reality is that in most businesses, you can't really scale something up unless you are, a team of partners and employees. And I mean, if you look at, for example, Joe Rogan, you could make the argument that he's the ultimate one-person business. Joe Rogan, the business is probably worth $1 billion and it's like one person, but actually it's not one person because he's got an entire production team. He's using Spotify, etc., etc. So you can't really live in isolation if you want to achieve something other than just making a living for yourself.
Yeah, so I don't know the numbers for Rogan, but from another really popular podcast, The Diary of a CEO, Stephen Bartlett, he mentioned that he has a team of 50 people that run his whole operation and allow him to publish, I think, 2 videos a week, which is a massive effort, right? Because these are incredibly detailed, well edited, long, like 2.5 hour long conversations with cool guests. Of course, it takes a huge team to do that. It's not, doesn't just fall from the sky. But so on this note, I mean, I guess a different thought experiment. But so if tomorrow all your websites and online presence were wiped out and you'd have to rebuild from scratch, what would you do?
Just rebuild it from scratch. The nice thing is things get easier in life. Once you've done it once, then you can redo it again much, much faster. And yeah, that really answers it. And I mean, we live in a day and age where losing everything and having to start over is not a common experience. But for our ancestors, that was not an uncommon experience. Every generation or 2 or 3, everyone lost everything. And my grandparents lived in Bohemia in what is now the Czech Republic, and they were ethnic Germans, so they got kicked out at the end of the Second World War. They lost everything and they had to start over from scratch. And I guess having skills and contacts, your network, will always enable you to rebuild. It's obviously not pleasant, but I think this is why having multiple skills and building a strong network is so important, because bad stuff can happen to you, even nowadays, even though it's less frequent.
Sven, do you lean more on the build it and they will come? Like you just focus on creating good content and they'll come? Or are you more thinking about, hey, I need to first get that logistics, network marketing angle right, have a list somehow, and then create content that can then get a wide distribution.
So I think build it and they will come is one of the most often made mistakes of entrepreneurs.
Mhm.
The truth is, no one cares about you. No one cares about your product or your service. Unless you tell the world about it, you will have zero sales. And I see it in the world of fund management, where there is literally an ocean of fund managers with a great performance and very little assets under management because no one's ever heard of them. And I think that counts in most areas of business. Of course, generalizing always means there are some exceptions, but build it and they will come is something I've also done with, other ventures when I was earlier, and that just didn't work at all. And building an audience, building a following, communicating, call it marketing if you like, I think is as important as it's ever been. And it's also easier than it's ever been because anyone can nowadays go on the internet and build a following. And there's this old saying, with 1,000 people who follow you, you can make a living. And then someone else wrote an article about you can probably do that with 100 people already. And there's a lot of truth in that. And, if you build a business, think about that before you actually get going and start to, have fixed costs on a monthly basis.
Well, I'm glad you came to that point. Because are you talking about the Kevin Kelly article? Because I was wanting to ask you, do you think, the way I see it, I talked to Lovis about it, if we could build something where we have 1,000 true fans, right? Where they were, let's say, eagerly or happy to consume what we're creating, then that is a pretty good goal to set for us going forward. And pretty cool that you mentioned it now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is entirely possible. I think what everyone underestimates and what is often forgotten in conversation is what do you need to do to have someone become a true fan? I mean, you can have 1,000 people following you on YouTube or even signed up to your email list, but at what point do they become true fans who will also, happily support you in your work financially? And I think what gets forgotten and what is underestimated is the value of consistency and having done something for a while. And there's this great rule that in, I guess, podcasts and blogs, in the first year, 90% of people give up. And in the second year, another 90% of those who are left give up, which means that from year 3, only 1% of those who started are still actually around. And I'm a big believer in anything you start will take 3 years to get anywhere to begin with. And case in point, Google, I believe, recognizes that when someone has produced content consistently for 3 years, then you get ranked a lot higher. And I think that works in people's brains as well. Once you've been around for 3 years and you produced a piece of content, say every month or every week, then people really respect you and they have that trust to actually give you money and not worry about, hey, if I pay $100 now, are these people going to disappear next month? But takes 3 years, and by that time 99% will have given up. It's an unbelievable number, but it's entirely true, and I've observed that in real life as well.
Yeah. So when Jason and I started, I said, so based on this, really, I set the goal for us. I said we have to do 10 episodes. It is not worth even starting if we're not committing to 10, because there's a similar statistic. I didn't know the one about the 1 year, but there's a similar statistic that 90% of all podcasts that get started don't achieve episode 11, basically. So I was like, I'm not doing it unless we commit. Yeah.
It's that, and if you want to have me tell you a bit about a magic thing in content generation, it's also that media consumption is a habit. And you have to produce consistently to become part of the habits of your followers. And
that's a good
that's
point.
the reason why I produce an article on my blog, undervaluedshares.com, every Friday religiously. At most, there will be 2 weeks a year when I might not produce something, which is usually, like the week between Christmas and New Year's, I'm considering whether I do something. But other than that, and I think last year I did 52 articles, if I'm not mistaken. And there are way too many people who think, oh, I'm taking August off because in August, I'm going on holiday with my family. In 3 or 4 weeks, people change their habits and they will have forgotten about you and change to someone else if you do that. So consistency is an incredible power if you utilize it to your advantage, but it can also really, throw you back if you're inconsistent.
Well,
Well,
that's
thanks
a
for
good
really
point.
driving that home. That's really
Yeah.
good. It's so easy to say, oh, we got to be consistent, but no, like specific, right? Every Friday, same time, no matter what. That's the level of consistency. That's really cool. So wanting to talk a little bit about your contrarian thinking and investing. I mentioned in the introduction the weird shit investing summit. It's even fun to say. So how did you come up with that? Is that your event, or are you participating in it, or how does that work?
No, it's my event. And
Yeah.
so it came about because I write a blog called undervalueshares.com. And because I believe very much in the power of meeting people in real life, and because I have very interesting readers, I regularly send out emails saying, hey, I'm in this or that city on whatever date. Do you want to, do a few people want to get together for drinks or dinner? And I hosted a few readers for drinks in New York. And one of them said, hey, Swen, you're always writing about this really cool, weird shit. You should do a conference about that. And then 2 days later, I told a friend in Miami about that. And it was basically decided there and then, let's do this. And I did the inaugural edition of the Weird Shit Investing Conference last year, 2024. I did it in London on Tuesday, and then I flew over to New York the following day and did it in New York on Thursday. So the host traveled instead of making the guests travel. And it was a great success. A manual of investment ideas came out of it. I'm going to do it again this year with lots of improvements and tweaks and changes. Last year was pretty good. I think this year is going to be absolutely exceptional. And it's all about investment ideas that are unusual, complex, innovative. I don't want to use the word exotic because then you think it's just about, stocks that are traded in Africa. It's not that. It needs to be genuinely unusual and out of the box thinking. And it attracts an extraordinarily interesting set of participants.
So, sorry, Lovis. Let me just ask this quick. I like this quote from Schopenhauer, right? And he says, and you might have heard it before, he says, thus the task is not so much to see what no one has seen yet, but to think what nobody has thought yet about that what everybody sees. Do you think that that's accurate? Or do you think, no, what you're doing, you're actually going deeper than that, and you're actually trying to see what others have not yet seen?
Oh, wow. So great quote. I've never heard it before. I'll have to reread it to fully comprehend it. But I mean, there's really two things. The first one is there are no secrets in this world and everything has been written about somewhere. So what we call original thought will already exist somewhere in 99% of all cases. That said, especially in financial markets, there are generally overlooked corners, and they're overlooked usually because they've become forgotten or because it's very complex. And then you need to find the right specialists who make it their calling to find out and research these niche opportunities. And that's really what I'm bringing together. And some of these opportunities are basically only exist because of, for example, political correctness. No one wants to look at them right now. Bloomberg recently had an article about the people who made bucket loads of money from finding ways how to invest into Russian equities. And that would certainly qualify for such a conference. Other things were forgotten. We had someone presenting last year about defaulted debt securities on the Greek stock exchange that came into existence after the Greek financial crisis, the de facto default of the country, and simply no one's been looking at that thing anymore. So it can be many different things. It just has to be something that you wouldn't have read about in the Financial Times yet, and where you just simply say, wow, that investment really makes sense. I would never have come up with it. And I want to speak to that guy and, make him my friend because this was an amazing presentation. It's very much also about meeting other people. And that's what this event is doing.
Yeah. So, one of the magical things that happens in this space that you're in is you get to follow your natural passion, your curiosity. Obviously, you are actively investing yourself in the stuff you research and you talk about, but then you get to connect with other people who are like-minded and turn you on to even more cool opportunities. So it just becomes like this like floral bouquet of opportunity and shared opportunity with others, right? So it's such a win-win-win thing. So this is what strikes me as really being one of the most positive and powerful life and business designs, kind of a thing.
Yep.
If that
And
makes sense.
it's greatly appreciated by participants. So, I mean, everyone nowadays, not everyone, but like we live in this supposedly this age of loneliness and people not having enough friends anymore. Many business meetings are done by Zoom. And to really connect with people, you need to be in a place where the right framework for that exists, and an event where you meet for drinks the evening before, you get to meet the participants, then you spend an entire day together talking about stuff that everyone's interested in, having dinner together, then possibly another, breakfast meetup the next day. That gives you quality connections to people who are like-minded, but also totally different. And that's greatly appreciated. This is really where the magic happens. And it takes a lot of effort to organize these things. It's also very frustrating to organize because there are things like, people don't want to pay for stuff. They complain about this is expensive, or, they don't read the rules of the game. And then, they present something that they shouldn't present. Lots of people cancel, and, you constantly have to change the plan. So it's frustrating while you're preparing it, but then once you've done it, you're glad that you did it. And the participants, this year it's going to be half of the participants will be people from the previous year, repeat guests, and the other half will be new faces. And it's a concept that works, and I think we should all make more effort to meet in person more often.
When
Are there
so
still some spots up for grabs?
yeah,
Say it again.
I said, are there still some spots left for grabs?
Sort of. I've only just started marketing, but I'm extremely strict with who can attend. And I am vetting everyone for their expertise and track record in researching such opportunities. And we're not really a public event as such. We are sort of an insiders event. So it's everyone who attends has to present an investment case. And there's only space for 16, and I'm filtering very, very strictly who that is. Sorry if I sound negative, but that's the value of the event.
no, that was going to be my next question. Because I didn't know the format exactly. If it is a public event and there's presentations, or if it's really everybody who comes, like you said, everybody who comes also gives a presentation.
There will
That's
probably
fantastic.
be a public Weird Shit Investing Conference later this year in a very different format. Watch this space. It's going to be announced in the foreseeable future.
Nice. Yeah, I'll be happy to also do an update when that happens. So just let us know and we'll post about it. Do you have any investment beliefs that you once thought were like the thing, like you held that belief dear, but then you realized it was wrong, or it turned wrong over time?
God, I sort of have to make a pass on that. That's a difficult one. Very complex question.
Well, then let me ask a different question. So you find value in, your blog's called Undervalued Shares, right? So you find value in things that others aren't currently valuing. Looking at it a different way, what are people overvaluing in today's world, whether in business investing or in life?
Well, I guess the obvious answer here is that investing right now in the stock market has become very much a herd thing, where basically the entire planet continues to pile into just a few stocks. We've got this unbelievable market concentration, and stocks like Nvidia, I guess Google, and you name them, the Mag 7, by conventional valuation metrics, they're probably overvalued. But of course, their stock price has defied all that for many years, and saying that makes you look a bit stupid. So I think earnings and future cash flow is currently overvalued, and what is generally undervalued is the fact that in the long run, markets do revert to mean, and these things always correct, and it's very painful when it does correct.
Okay, is there any? I guess the other ones that people overvalue is the security that you get from a 9 to 5 job, for example? Because
Oh yeah. It's that. I mean, first of all, having a job is really expensive because it robs you of all the really great opportunities in life, and very, very few people really get rich from having conventional employment. And there is a cost that comes with that, and people should be very aware that life is only so long, and especially when it comes to setting up a business. So there's this relatively unknown statistic that the most successful entrepreneurs are the people who set up their business when they're 44, which basically means that all this glamorizing about the 22-year-old kids in Silicon Valley who set up a new business is statistically, they're just such outliers.
Yeah.
Then again, there's huge value in setting something up when you're young, because what have you got to lose? You have time. You're not tied down yet by family and obligations, towards, the education of your children, or supporting, your spouse financially, etc., etc., etc. When you're young and single, just go for it and try out things. And I think that is both a certain risk, but it's also a risk to not take risks.
Yeah.
There is a quote from someone about, not taking risks is in itself very risky. The quote is slightly different, but I very much believe that's true.
Yeah, I don't know if that statistic with the 44-year-old, does that speak to how many times they've tried? Because I would bet that's not their first time they're starting something.
That could very well be. I read this. There are articles and there's research about this. I read this years ago. What I
Yeah.
remember most is the answer to the question, why are they more likely to succeed when they set up a business in their mid-40s? And the answer is network. It's not experience that ranks first, it's network. They can pick up the phone and ring people who can help them succeed in whatever way. And you don't have that when you're in your 20s.
That's a powerful point, Jason. I think that one resonates with you because Jason is a bit of a compulsive network builder.
I just
So
like having interesting conversations with interesting people. And and when we decided to start this, like you said, having that network just helps so much, right? Because people are willing to come on, people are willing to share their thoughts with us, people are willing to, introduce others for us to speak to. And I think, being a 18, 20, 22-year-old, just cold calling or cold emailing people, it might not have been that easy, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, there's the old saying about your network is your net worth. I think there's some truth to that. And again, you are blessed living at the right time, because there's stuff now like LinkedIn where you can just continuously collect people and stay in touch with them in a very easy way. All of that took a lot more effort in the past. And it's not like you need to be in close contact with everyone in your network all the time. Sometimes you lose track of someone for 10 or 20 years, but you're connected on, say, LinkedIn or whatever it is, and you're aware of each other's writing on the internet. That makes everything a lot easier nowadays.
Hey, Sven, you mentioned NVIDIA just now, and that the Mag 7 is a real concentration in investment, right? All, let's say, coalescing around those few tickers. I saw, and I liked it, that on your website, on your landing page, you said you're 100% ChatGPT free. So could you tell us a little bit more on that, and what are your views on AI in general going forward?
So I'm a complete AI amateur because I have literally not even really tried it out. I made this observation that all the people I know who are lazy, they were the first ones to use ChatGPT. And I in my life, I've not seen lazy people succeed. Most things are down to hard work and staying on it for a long time. And the other thing I would say, and that's probably the number one reason why I put this onto the website, there's tremendous value in being original. And I would doubt that something like the AI that we have right now can produce genuinely original thought. Case in point, folks, or just as an example, 2 weeks ago, I published an article about investing in human bones as a financial investment. And that could be, 50-year-old medical skeletons, or it could be 3,000-year-old Peruvian elongated skulls. And amazingly, no one had ever written a substantive article about investing in human bones. And I was the first one to do that. And that brought me, a lot of enthusiastic feedback from my readership. And that's exactly what I'm here to do. And since no one has done it before, could ChatGPT come up with that idea? I doubt it. And that's I see as the value I can contribute, to come up with stuff that others haven't thought of yet, which is rare, but occasionally you hit the right mark.
No, I saw that one and I was like, man, this guy's really out of the box. So it definitely works. So I know we're getting towards the top of the hour here, but I would love to close with an anecdote if you have one. Basically, do you have any good stories about a spectacular failure, a so-called fuck up that you thought was the end of your life, but then turned out maybe not so bad, or maybe blessing in disguise?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So I always call it my $7 million MBA. When I was, when was that? So when I was sort of like 26, 27, 28, I believe, I involved myself in a startup involving creating a luxury cosmetics brand in Russia. Friends of mine wanted to set that up, and I said, that sounds exciting. I'll help with fundraising. And then we did raise money for that. It was a relatively easy fundraising environment. And basically, we had absolutely no idea what we were doing. And we just kept spending more and more money. And every time it didn't work, we just, threw more money at it. And eventually that thing sank. And two lessons here. First of all, so after round one of funding this, I had a strong gut feeling this is not going to work. And then friends of mine in the finance industry said, oh no, Sven, you need to give this more time. And, this needs more resources. Let us try and we'll invest into it. And my gut feeling was, don't take the money, just basically bury the whole thing and cut your losses. And I acted against that and then had years of a big mess to deal with. And the other thing is, we literally, as I always say, we spent $7 million with nothing to show for it. There was no value in the company at all at the end of that period. Yeah. And that was a huge embarrassment. And I'm joking about it now, but I took this, quite serious at the time. And it did feel like, life's coming to an end. Interestingly enough, what kicks in eventually is something that an ex-girlfriend of mine once said, that in a 5-year time horizon, virtually nothing matters. So anything that really gets you down right now, in 5 years, you probably will literally not even remember it anymore. And I have come to believe that is quite accurate most of the time. And the other thing is that your negative experiences eventually become something extremely valuable, because having failed and having hurt yourself is extraordinarily valuable if you repackage and communicate it in the right way. And, now I can joke about my $7 million MBA and people know immediately, oh, he's got experience how not to do it and how to avoid mistakes. And that's where this thing is just so unbelievably valuable.
Excellent. Sven, thank you so much. So what's the best way for anybody that hears this and wants to follow you, subscribe, etc., to find you?
So the best way is really to subscribe to my investment blog called undervaluedshares.com, where I publish a free weekly article. And I, up to this point, had a personal website called Swen Lorenz, swenlorenz.com, which I am just about to switch off because of focus. I use that website to write about all sorts of things, entrepreneurship and fundraising, politics, lifestyle, etc. But I haven't written on it for 3 years. And I've now finally admitted to myself that in the next 3 years, I'm not going to have time either. So I'm switching that off. So follow me on undervaluedshares.com. That's really the way forward.
Excellent. Yeah, and I see on there that you have a very reasonably priced subscription tier of just $49 per year, I think.
Yeah. It's ridiculously cheap for a number of reasons. I think we should have a separate conversation about online publishing at some point. But first and foremost, there's a great free article every week. I'm very passionate about my weekly writing, and that costs nothing. It doesn't even require you signing up. And that's, I think, something your readers should check out.
100%. Cool. All right. Thank you so much.
Great. Yes. It's been fun talking to you, and let's do this again sometime. We could have gone on for hours.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
This was another tightly time-fenced conversation. I kind of think I really like it, actually.
it's good, right? We pack things in. Everyone tries to make sure the value per information signal per minute is pretty high.
So he keeps saying our generation, and I don't know he doesn't know how old we are, I don't think. I think there's only 10, 12 years between us. I guess that it's not wrong. Like, it does put us probably in a different mindset of a different generation, maybe. Maybe a bit more familiar with the internet tools growing up, etc. But I just really love this because I genuinely think of him as being this like 10, 15 years ahead of us on the learning curve.
Yeah.
And there's like so much value that he shared, I think.
I mean, perhaps what he meant by generation is not only age, but where we are in our evolution as, let's say, investors or creative writers, or people that produce content in an entrepreneurial capacity rather than working as a 9 to 5, right? So maybe that's what he's referring to. We'll have to ask him.
What did you think was unexpected, like a fun takeaway?
I like the way he helped us to frame it when he said, "Hey, just be consistent," right? That's good. I agree, but it's good to be reminded. I can totally resonate with what he's saying about going out and meeting people. Like, right? We've talked about this 100 times, and the magic that happens is so priceless. It's almost laughable that a lot of times people choose to just send an email, right? I know it's so much easier, right? And it's just everyone's got family to look after and obligations. But when you set that time aside, yeah, I often think about Grant Williams. When I was subscribed to him at Real Vision, he would spend that time traveling around the world to sit with people while he did those interviews, right? And it was very inspirational for me to see that. So yeah, those are the two: meet people and be consistent.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, you've been the one basically reminding me to do that more, right? And all the positive outcomes, I think, in my life, I can trace back to being in the room with the right person at the right time, more or less. And there's always an element of luck. And I really like this. I think it's a concept from Naval, but you increase your surface area for getting lucky, right? By being out there, by doing more things, doing like sometimes random things that you maybe have never done before. You run into cool people, you think new thoughts, you are exposed to new ideas. Like, I think that's seriously what it's all about.
Yeah. I mean, say people look at the world and they see their roles as, contrasting between being a maker versus being a manager, right? So if you're a manager, you think about, hey, I've got this list I need to check off. So I need to just tick, tick, tick. The faster I tick it off, the better I am at my job as a manager, right? But if you're a maker, you don't really know what's on the other side of what you're trying to create, right? And then when you go and meet somebody, how do why would you write something off the checkbox to say, hey, I need to go and meet this person, right? It's not a task. But if you were making something or you wanted somebody's advice, then going there and you allowing for that magic to be part of the reason behind things, then you're more able to do it, right? Because you go there with not a fixed outcome in mind. And perhaps that's what makes the difference, which mode you're in at that moment, right?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe the open-endedness, the chance for serendipity, right? When you meet with somebody. But then, of course, also tons of factors that can influence it both positively and negatively. You never know what shape or mood the person's in at the time. But I don't know. There's also something about like sensing someone's energy, right? Just being in the room with them, you can like pick up on so much more than just on the phone. Although, I mean, one thing that I also truly believe in is with certain things, like writing the email is actually going to hurt you, right? So just pick up the phone and call them. It's already like a 10x improvement
Right.
over purely written.
Right.
But it, of course, presupposes that you have a way to call them.
Yeah. And I guess that's what he meant about going out there, meeting people, build what your network is your net worth, right? Because it's all about who can you call and get 5 minutes of their undivided attention, and they would be happy to help you. And I think it's very reciprocal, right? Over your lifetime, if you have done things for others, people are more likely to say, hey, I would love to pay it back.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, so I'm glad that I stumbled across his blog, Swen Lorenz, before he shuts it down, because there's some good stuff on there. He's had, like, there's an article from 2020 where he's showing the numbers of his first $100,000 month of sales, right? So this has kind of really helped me expand my view of like what a blogging business can be worth and what kind of numbers you can do, right? That's like
100,000 divided by $50. It's like, is that 2,000 people signed up?
so I don't know if this, I mean, he also has this lifetime membership. I would imagine that that's
Like
because
100 people. It could also
yeah,
be 100 people signing up to that.
it says here completed transactions 231, revenue 119,000, one refund. One refund of $49. So yeah, $119,800 in revenue. So it was probably a mix of annually reoccurring and then a bunch of lifetimers as well. But that's cool, right? And then when we ask him, he doesn't even push it. He says, no, just subscribe to the free one. I'm very proud of that one. Right? Like I love that. I love that he was like, yeah, don't even worry about that one. The free one is where it's at.
Yeah. Yeah, similar to what Rick Rule said, right? Just create value and it will resonate and people come back and people go, hey, I want more of your stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it's build trust first, right? And then even get into the circle, right? And then when he writes like, hey, I'm going to be in this town, go and meet, right? Go and meet him.
Yeah.
Have him buy you a drink.
I want to go to London now. I want to go to that weird shit investing conference.
Yeah, we have to set that as a goal. Maybe one day we can be cool enough that we can give a presentation there.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love to even just go to the public one first, right?
Yeah.
If he does one end of the year.
Yes, if he does a public one, for sure, I would also go and attend.
Yeah.
Super cool. Well, I mean, he does two, right? So he curates different groups, people in Europe and in the US, and he has plenty of attendance for both. So that there's little glimpses that show you his network's pretty deep, pretty legit.
I mean, if he's looking for 16 people to give a presentation and they've not been on the list before, that's nice.
Yeah. That's pretty cool.
It's a good way to enter the group, right?
Yeah. Really cool. Well, I'm very grateful for Adrian Day's recommendation of looking into undervalued shares and by extension Sven and having him on. I think it's
yes. Thanks, Adrian.
Super rich addition, and definitely looking forward to connecting with Sven more. There's I think tons of more tidbits he can give us specifically because it's very relevant to what we're trying to do. And also, I haven't finished reading some of his articles. I have to read them and download them maybe before he turns off that blog.
Or maybe he'd be happy to give you like an archived version.
Yeah, that's true. All right, Jay, I can tell that you're not feeling 100%, so go and rest.
I mean, I'm in Singapore and I'm shivering, so rare experience.
Right, jet lag and a bug.
I'm glad we could make it happen. I enjoyed it tremendously, and let's reconnect with him at some future point, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, my friend. Talk
Thanks,
soon.
Ovis. Catch you later.